Director of Public Works and all sorts of things, and his amazing team for their really hard work and heavy lifting on this topic. At the end of April, members of our Public Works and Utilities team asked the public for 100 households living in single-family homes to volunteer to take a free lead test. To be eligible for this free test, homeowners or renters had to be living in a house that was built before 1930. Generally, the city provides free lead testing every 3 years, and we ask for 30 volunteers to be part of the study. This year, our staff and Jim wanted to be really proactive in collecting 100 samples 3 years ahead of new federal guidelines that are coming out around acceptable lead levels. So we wanted to start testing these higher, just let that go. We wanted to get ahead of the testing requirements that were coming, start practicing that, and so we did that this year, 3 years ahead of time. On Friday, we received test results, and we wanted to share those results with the public. So today you're going to hear from Jim Benning as he provides details on the results, the next step the city's taking, how we're communicating with residents who have received test levels that we want to make sure that they are tracking, how we're communicating with the rest of the community, and then what we think we can do about it all. So with that, Jim?
Thank you, Mayor Larson. Am I waiting? Okay. My name's Jim Benning. I'm the Public Works Utilities Director for the city. I want to start off by saying that the quality of the drinking water in Duluth has not changed. It's the same great drinking water we had 10 years ago, last year, as it is today. So that has not changed. The city of Duluth has actually won awards for our quality of our drinking water in the past. We're very proud of that. We have been, and we are currently in full compliance with EPA and state regulations relating to all of our standards for drinking water. But what will be changing is what Mayor Larson talked about, is the new rules that will be coming into effect. The EPA is publishing some new rules in December of this year for lead and copper, the levels, and the method of testing. We currently test 30 homes in Duluth every 3 years. The test consists of the first liter of water. That means when we give a person a sample cup, they take whatever first comes out of the tap, and that gets sent to the lab and tested. The threshold level is that 90% of the samples that are tested must be below 15 parts per billion of lead. And our current 90th percentile is 12 parts per billion. So like I mentioned that we were in compliance, 12 is below 15, so obviously we're in compliance. The new rules that would be published later this year and become effective in 2024 change the sampling from the first liter to the fifth liter. So what that means is we give a person a sample cup, they let 5 liters of water run, and then they sample that water. And why that's important is that water, that fifth liter, has been sitting, what we anticipate is somewhere in that service line. And the service line is the pipe that leads from the water main to your house. So we're trying to capture that water that's been sitting overnight in the service line and not just what's been sitting in the tap as we currently do. So that's the change to the method of testing. The testing results are also changing. The trigger level for the new system is now going to be 10 parts per billion and an action level of 15 parts per billion. And the difference between those two is that the trigger level at 10 parts per billion, if we exceed that, we're supposed to optimize our system. We're going to do that using various chemicals in the system that are obviously safe to drink, to increase or decrease the level of corrosiveness in the water to keep that lead in the pipe where it belongs. And the action level, if we exceed 15 parts per billion, the change is that we're going to be required, mandated, to replace 3% of lead service lines annually throughout the city. Although not required, like Mayor Larson said, we did conduct 102 tests on homes with lead service lines ahead of the new requirement. All homes were tested all tests were conducted on homes with lead service line. And let me explain a little bit about what a service line is. The service line is made up of two components. The public side, which goes from the main that we own to the curb stop, which we own. And the curb stop is that little pipe that sticks out of the grass that you sometimes hit with your lawnmower, you trip over it. That's public. We are responsible for that. The public side goes from the curb stop to the home. And that's
Private side.
Private side, thank you. The private side goes from the curb stop to the home, and that's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain. Lead service lines typically were installed prior to 1929, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some that were installed after that. So using the new 5th liter sampling method, the 90th percentile is now 31.7 parts per billion compared to 12. And out of the 102 samples, 30 exceeded 15 parts per billion and 49 exceeded 10 parts per billion. The results of those samples will be sent to each of the participants probably as early as today. We estimate that there are 4,600 lead services on the public side, and there's probably more on the private side. So upwards of 5,000 lead service lines in the city that we're going to have to deal with. We will be sending letters out to the property owners that we know of, that the city knows about, that's in our GIS system, so that they're aware that they had the lead service line, and also what they can do to help reduce the risk with having a lead service line attached to their home. If someone does not get a letter, and if they're unsure if they have a lead service line, they can call engineering at 730-5200. We'll look up the information we have. I'm also going to point people to our city website, and in the search, if you just type in water, it's going to pull up 6 results, and you type the one that says water, and there's an excellent instruction provided by the National Public Radio that steps you through step by step, 7 different steps on how you can self-identify if you have a lead service line or not. If you determine that you do have a lead service line, you can go back to that same website, and there's a form that you fill in, put in your information, click it, enter, and now you're part of that 5,000 plus group, and will be eligible for help in the future, hopefully to replace those service lines. If there's people that are still unsure, they can call up engineering, 730-5200, and we will arrange for a service person to go into your house, look at your service line, and determine if it's lead or not. And if it is, we will enter that information into our database. The whole process, minus questions and answers that homeowners might have, is probably going to be about 3 minutes. So very, very fast process. And doesn't cost anything, free. Homes that have been identified with lead service lines can reduce the risk of exposure. First of all, use cold water for drinking and food preparation. Hot water tends to be more corrosive and will help lead leach out of pipes, so use cold water. Running a faucet a few minutes each morning, first thing you do. Take a shower, that'll help flush your, before you brush your teeth, just before you use anything for food preparation or drinking, flush it for a few minutes. And if necessary, water filters can easily be installed at properties. And, the question might come up, so I'm wasting water now. And that's true, we don't like to waste water, but the public health benefits of that small amount of water outweigh what we might be wasting. And my staff is coming up with a number to credit the properties that have lead service lines, so that amount of will not be part of their bill. We're going to take that off the bill to help encourage this. The city has been removing lead service lines on our projects for the past 20 years on the public side. We are actively pursuing grant money from the state and federal level so we can continue to do it on the public side as well as the private side. That's going to be our new initiative that we're pursuing. So we're obviously committed to taking this challenge head on. We're ahead of the game. We weren't required to do this testing, but we did it, almost a year in advance. for the health and safety of our residents.
So thank you, Jim. So just a couple things. We got kind of technical, and that's important because people do need and want to know the details, and the details really matter. I think in summary, we jumped ahead on the testing because we wanted to see where we were at. We're not required to do this. We got information that would put us out of future compliance. We want to let people know that. We want to help residents get ahead of this. You can call our office. You can go on the website. To find out if your home is one that you want to know more about the lead service pipe. We are looking at funding opportunities. We have let our state delegation know. We have let our senators know. We are looking at whatever funding opportunities we have that we can help partner with homeowners to make sure that we are removing as much lead as we possibly can from the system. And this reminds me a little bit, a few years ago, we had lead levels that were a little higher than we liked seeing. We were not out of compliance for any reason. We were public about that with people. The public called. They wanted to know. They used the resources to find out whether their home is one to be concerned about. So we know the public tracks this with us. We're so glad for that. We take your drinking water very seriously, and we are eager to get ahead of this as much as we possibly can with all of you. And again, we just want to thank Jim Benning, of course, our director, and Jim's entire team, who is really terrific. We found out about this on Friday. Yesterday, we began our outreach with residents and people who are impacted. We'll continue to do that today. It's Tuesday morning. We want people to know about this so that they can be a partner in their own health and wellness. So with that, did you have more before we take questions? Okay, questions? Yeah, we are looking at that actually right now. So we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with counselors to hear about what their ideas were too. This did come up. It was on our list of things. We are looking to see what's possible and what would qualify. Do you want to say anything more about that?
No, you covered
okay,
it.
Yeah.
It was at the top of my list to give to Mayor Larson for consideration, and I believe she's all on board.
Yeah, we're taking it seriously, and we'll bring those recommendations forward to the council for their first 2 meetings in July. They're only 2 meetings in July. So, and we anticipate if this is at all possible, there will be some budget space in our recommendations for this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So each of our utilities is a little different on where public and private ownership separates. And on the water side specifically, there's the water main, it's the bigger pipe, and there's going to be a smaller pipe, typically a 3/4 inch pipe, that'll feed your house. And that pipe goes from the main. The next thing it hits is the curb stop. That's that pipe about that big that sticks out of the lawn or out of your sidewalk. And that's the change of ownership. So if something breaks we get a leak on the public side, we go out there and fix it. The private side goes from the curb stop to the house. If that leaks, we help by providing contractor information that contractors have done this in the past, but those repair costs and responsibility are borne by the property owner. And that would hold true currently with replacement of lead services. What we want to do is get to the point where we can use public money on private property to fix or replace those services.
Those locations, we don't have that readily available yet, but we will be working on that. I think as Jim had mentioned earlier, when we were reviewing all of the different sites, we were looking at, are there any commonalities within neighborhoods? And the commonalities that we did find so far were places that were located within dead ends as opposed to highly and more densely populated areas within town. Is that helpful?
Jim, you want to take some of that too?
Yeah, the samples, 102, were volunteers, but it ended up being a nice random pattern throughout the city. And there's not one neighborhood that's affected more than the other. In the 1930s and earlier, there were there were houses all over. So you can't say one neighborhood is worse than the others. What Kate did say is true. It's more on where your home is located on that water main. We're seeing more results from that as opposed to individual neighborhoods. If you live on a dead-end water main, I'm not going to give any examples. A dead-end street, the pipe goes in and typically just stops. If you're the last house there, your water's still good, but it probably has been sitting in that water main for longer than if it were coming off this street, which the water's whizzing by on a continual basis.
Peter?
Okay, having lead in the water system, I mean, is the ultimate goal to get lead piping out of the system?
Absolutely.
Or do you think that you can continue to operate with so many people having lead certified?
So we won't be able to do this overnight. 5,000 is going to take quite some time to remove those. That's why we're going for the mitigation and lowering the risk. But our current plan definitely involves the replacement of lead service lines on an annual basis until they're all gone. There'll probably be a new director, probably a new mayor, but eventually every lead service line in Duluth will be eliminated.
And I think, Jim, you mentioned that there are 30,000 properties in Duluth, right?
I did not, but that is
There's 30,000 properties across Duluth. 5,000 of them are the ones that we're more concerned about. So, yes, our goal would be that we eliminate lead in the servicing altogether. It will take us a little bit of time to do that. I think in the big picture, no amount of lead is the right amount of lead. I think, and we're doing, of course, what we can chemically as we treat the water to remove any corrosives and things like that as well. But it will take us a little while to get there. But the vast majority of homeowners and private property owners will not have, lead service lines, do not need to be concerned. And again, we're trying to get ahead so that we continue to meet the standards that are acceptable and in line with health and EPA for the future. Yep.
So yeah, that's true, and each property is different. If your water main's on the same side of the street as your property, it's a shorter distance. It's going to be less expensive. If it's on the other side of the street, now you're restoring the road when you're replacing these. We're using $8,000 as an average, but that's highly variable depending on each property. That's what we use for budgetary purposes.
Peter, I just want to jump in because you and a couple other outlets have looked at our housing indicator report. There's almost 39,000 housing units in Duluth. There are 28,000 water customers. So of the 5,000, that's 18% that we're working with. So just to clarify that number. Any additional questions? Is that 8,000 for like the average homeowner?
This is the whole project. Looking at my chief engineer back there, and that's both sides. That's the public and private side, yes. And some of those, as we've done projects in the past, the street improvement projects, we have already replaced the public side on a lot of properties. So that's good. That will mean that the project is going to be about half that, and more importantly is we're not digging into the street anymore. It's already been, that part's been done. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing that since I've been employed here, and that's 20 some years. So we are going to continue. We'll have to do our normal compliance. That's a good question. Our normal compliance next year, 2022, does use the old standards. That 15 parts per billion, 30 samples across the city. We have had discussions internally that we are going to sample additional homes, as well as take additional samples from the homes that we already have results on. What we want to see is, instead of taking the 5th liter, we're going to take the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, all the way up to the 10th liter, and we're going to see how that correlates to the bleeding. And if we come up with different information, maybe a minute isn't long enough to bleed your water. We're going to have a quantifiable number to say, you should run your water for X number of minutes, and then we're going to know you've got a flush. And if you do that, the results show that it decreases the lead from this down to this hopefully acceptable level.
How many people requested it? Do you know?
Approximately 200 people that had asked for a test. Any other questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is this team?